Were there any more like buildings you guys went into, or was that like?
Well, then after that building, then moved to North Hollywood, and we were on a street called Cleon, in maybe a 3,000 square foot building. It was there that my dad started kind of like a side company called Studio Plastics with two guys named Bob Bonning and Milt Rice. Those guys were in the prop making business. They discovered my dad and they used him to make certain sculptures and props for movies and things like that, little jobs. They wanted to get a vacuum form machine because there was a need to make these panels of plastics for sets. Like if you wanted a tin roof, you'd make it out of plastic and then create it into a set, or for all sorts of different things that might cost a lot to create, you could vacuum form the parts. Well, on the studio, they had a problem because this vacuum form thing was a new thing for the studios. So there'd be two people involved. There'd be somebody that would create the mold, the sculptors and everything. They'd create the mold. Then the plasterers, the mold makers, would actually make the mold. So when it came to operating the vacuum form machine, there was a dispute as to which group of people would operate the vacuum form machine. So by having a vacuum form machine, they could say, well, neither of you need to do the vacuum forming. We'll do it outside the studio. So they make those molds, and then they send the molds to Downpost Studios, and Downpost Studios would make the molds and do the vacuum forming. And in some cases, Downpost Studios would do the sculptures, make the molds, and do the vacuum forming. And so it was a nice little side business. There were some pretty good sized jobs that I remember. There was a movie called Irma la Douce. The setting was in France, and they made sides of French cars. They made sides of beef, a whole side of beef, so they could have a meat market scene without having to
all that meat,
have it spoiled. And then also they had meat that they wanted these people to carry, like you're carrying a side of beef. Well, that could weigh 250 pounds, but they could make one out of latex with a polyurethane foam filler in it, and it'd be very light, weighing maybe 10 pounds, and it wouldn't spoil. They could use it over and over again, but it was they'd make those kinds of things of props for movies, all the way down to they had these little letters that originally those letters would be made out of brass covered with porcelain and stuck on a window in France. But the way that they could make them, they could just vacuum form them. And it was quick and easy, a lot cheaper. So made a lot of stuff for that movie. The Great Race, the Cars buys for the Great Race. My Mother, the Car, which was a TV series. The Talking Car. And it was kind of like Mr. Ed as a car. Made a lot of stuff like that with Bob Bonning and Milt Rice. My dad did. And then, I don't know, it was just, when I think back on it now, I mean, it was a great education and a lot of fun to go, for instance, to a meat market and take a mold off a side of beef and other pieces like that. And then there's smaller things that they did. Like my dad did a lot for Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which was a TV series. I think the most important thing he did for that series was for an episode called Lambs to the Slaughter, which is about this woman who had killed her husband with a frozen side of leg of lamb. And then in the way it goes in the series is after she kills him, police are trying to figure out what the murder weapon is while she's feeding them the leg of lamb. So got involved in some things that kind of became notable, but it was fun being around all that stuff. And having my dad come home even when I wasn't down there, when I was going to in school, actually, and going there and hearing him talk about what was going on and what he was making for things, for different series, for different TV shows, a lot of stuff for Mission Impossible, all those masks where they changed the character, and which was a very simple thing to do, but it was very effective to the point where my dad would get letters from plastic surgeons saying, "How did you do that?" And it was a magic trick, but it was very effective. Let's see. So you wanted to know other places? Yeah. So we were on the street called Cleon, and then as I started to get involved, Dot Post Studios was in a very small building on Cleon,
right.
A smaller building.
Okay.
And we're there for a while, and that's where I really came in. And really the proposal I made to my dad is you got a lot of great stuff here, especially at the time, the Universal monsters, which were unaffordable, but very popular in concept to people because they were on the back of Famous Monsters magazine all the time. I was actually thinking of becoming a makeup artist. And John Chambers was saying to me, he said, "Well, come on down, kid, and we'll get you started and, get you into an apprenticeship. That easy." And I said to my dad, I said, I think there's a lot of potential in Dot Post Studios. I said, I want to try to make this stuff because everything was there, but there wasn't anybody there to put forth the energy to actually produce it. So I took the time and energy and, up to 10 or 12 hours a day producing that. And, during the time when we were really busy and during the summertime, I'd be working 6 days a week just making that stuff. And then it started to grow and grew into a legend.